Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, Today we got our second piece of news of the offseason. Well, second big piece of news. We also had the Bruce Brown trade come out this morning. Bruce Brown is a Brooklyn Net now, and I actually think that was a sneaky good move for the Nets, but obviously that's not the main topic of this video. The main topic is we are talking about Chris Paul being traded to the Phoenix Suns, where he will form one of the best backcourts in the entire NBA with Devin Booker. However, before we discuss this trade too much, I just want to leave a reminder for you to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Been appreciating all the support that I've gotten lately, and I hope to see that continue. Without further ado, let's get into this trade, the nitty gritty of the trade. And I want to start off by talking about it from the Suns' perspective because obviously this is the team that this is a bigger deal for. They acquired Chris Paul, who is going to be their best player for next season. Well, I guess Devin Booker could pass him by then, but as of right now, I would view Chris Paul as the best player on this roster. He is definitely going to make them a team that's a playoff contender for sure. I'm not sure exactly where in the West they're going to rank, but they're certainly in that range from the sixth to the ninth best team in the West. And this was a big step for them towards their path towards contention. Obviously, Chris Paul is up there in age, but they also did just need to acquire something that is going to, number one, convince Devin Booker that they are trying to build a winner around him in Phoenix, and also try to elevate themselves to a playoff contention level because this has been a team that hasn't made the playoffs in over a decade. So they're starting to feel the heat of trying to make the playoffs now. And overall, I think that this wasn't a terrible move for them. However, I would have rather seen them get the other OKC point guard in uh, Dennis Schroeder. I think that if they could have flipped Kelly Oubre for Dennis Schroeder, that would have been a better deal for them than this particular trade, because giving up Oubre and Rubio and Ty Jerome is really going to hurt the depth of this team moving forward. They don't have as much cap space. I thought they were going to be able to go out and sign a guy like Danilo Gallinari, Davis Bertans, or Paul Millsap to really fill in the hole that this team currently has at the power forward position. But now that they've added Chris Paul's huge contract, they're not going to have that kind of space. So more than likely, they're going to have to re-sign Dario Saric to play that power forward position for them, at least as a stopgap up until they have a young guy who's able to take that spot. And Saric is best, as we saw in the bubble, coming off the bench. So I guess in that case, Cameron Johnson will probably start at the four, but I really didn't think that that was a long-term possibility for them. I thought that they were going to probably move him back to the bench and have him just bring that shooting off the bench instead of being a stretch four. So overall, I just think that this is a little bit of a move that boosts them up and also brings them down a bit because they sacrifice depth to bring in a 36-year-old point guard who has seen better days. Obviously, last year was one of his better seasons in recent history because he is able to stay healthy. But if we see the injury bug come back, then this trade could look really, really bad for the Suns. The thing that I just keep coming back to was giving up that 2022 first-round pick. If Chris Paul ages poorly, that pick could end up being in the lottery. I just feel like they could have done this trade without giving up that pick. And even if they replace that with a future second round pick, I don't love giving up that pick if I'm the Suns, and I think that they probably could have done it without giving that up, like I said before. So in that way, this isn't my favorite move, as well as the whole depth aspect, but this does make them a way, way more interesting team, although they are a bit top-heavy. Starting lineup of Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson, and DeAndre Ayton is very exciting. It's four young guys plus Chris Paul, who was one of the better players of his generation. Paul's fit with Booker is going to be a little interesting. We saw Chris Paul play off the ball when he was with James Harden a bit more than he ever had at any other point in his career. But Devin Booker doesn't quite have the same sway in the league as James Harden at this point. So is Chris Paul going to be willing to give up a bunch of his touches to a guy that's still pretty young and hasn't necessarily proven himself as a superstar in the NBA yet, only has one All-Star appearance? I'm not real sure. I hope that he will, and it seemed like he did a lot of really good things for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's career in sparking Shai to take a big step forward this past season, but we have seen Chris Paul struggle with young players before. Blake Griffin would be the one that really pops into my head. So who knows if that whole chemistry thing works the best. In terms of basketball and real on the court basketball stuff, Chris Paul is going to be a fantastic option. I think that he can establish some really, really good pick and roll chemistry with DeAndre Ayton. This is a really big pickup for Ayton's development, and I think that it can help him grow and become a better center, especially on the offensive end. He's also going to be able to create open looks for Devin Booker and Cameron Johnson, the real sharpshooters on this Phoenix Suns roster. Those two guys are going to benefit off of this. And on the defensive end, there's not much of an upgrade with Chris Paul over Ricky Rubio, so I won't pretend that there is. But really, the value is coming in the playmaking, the ball handling, and I know I expressed some questions about if the chemistry would work, but overall, Chris Paul is one of the better leaders. He's going to establish a culture within your team. Monty Williams, along with him, is a really nice coach and point guard leadership duo. I know that they have some experience together from their days in New Orleans, but I don't think that there's any ill will between the two of them from that time. So the more I talk about it, the more I'm convincing myself that this is a good deal for the Suns. I'm really excited to see a backcourt of Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and I think that they could have a lot of success with that. In terms of what this means for their free agency, they're probably going to have to bring Dario Saric back. Prior to this trade, when I thought that they were going to have something around $16 or $17 million in cap space, I was in the camp that they probably were not going to offer Dario Saric the qualifying offer. However, after giving up a guy that's really important in your wing rotation in Kelly Oubre, Saric is probably a lot more of a necessity to bring back as a guy who's either going to be your starting four or your third big man off the bench, depending on how they view Cameron Johnson moving forward. Saric had some success in the bubble as an off-the-bench small ball five. We've seen how well he can shoot the ball. He has a bit of an ability as a ball handler. He rebounds pretty well for his size, and on defense, he's passable. So moving him to a small ball five instead of being a starter at the four seemed to be a pretty good fit for him, and I would look to see them bring him back on a deal. I could see something like a 2-year, $15 million deal being something that both parties could be interested in. Sarge could have some time to re-up his free agency value, because I think at one time when he was at the Philadelphia 76ers, his market value would have been much higher than the $7.5 million annually that I think that he'll likely be getting this offseason. And it would be intriguing for the Suns because he could be a cheaper option that could give you really good rotational minutes in a playoff rotation. So I do think that he'll probably be a priority in free agency. Unfortunately, I think that they will probably pay Aaron Baines. I hope that it's not too much, because I do think that Baines is one of the more overrated players heading into this free agency period. I think that he is not worth much more than the minimum, and for that reason, I would be very skeptical about paying him for a multi-year deal, especially with his age. But the Suns, like I said, do need depth. As of now, their backup to DeAndre Ayton at the center position would be Cheick Diallo, who has a team option for this season that I think that there's a real possibility that they'll decline to free up some cap space. So I'm sure Aaron Baines will be coming back. I heard that they can re-sign Sarge and Baines and keep the mid-level exception open for them. If that is true, then with the mid-level, I could see them targeting a player like Derrick Jones Jr. on a 4-year mid-level exception deal. So I think that would be somewhere in the range of 4 years, $36 million. I could see that being enough to get Jones to leave the Heat, and he could also be a magnificent option as a wing who can run the floor, play good defense, and is super athletic. So for the Suns, they will have some options in free agency. I just I was looking forward to seeing them sign a guy like Gallinari and seeing how that would all work, but this is okay too. Uh, it increases them, makes them more top heavy, but overall, I do think that it improves the roster, and for that reason, I am going to give the Suns a B minus on this trade. I think that they could have done a little better with finagling the details and trying to keep that 2022 first round pick. But outside of that, this does make them a better team, and that's really what you're looking for in this type of trade. So, like I said, B minus for the Suns. Now let's move on to the Thunder and talk about how I feel about this trade from their perspective. In return for Chris Paul and Abdel Nader, the Thunder received Ricky Rubio, Ty Jerome, Jalen Lecque, and Kelly Oubre, as well as the Suns' 2022 first round pick. If you haven't guessed it, based off of my slight pessimism for the trade in the Suns' direction, I am very optimistic about the Thunder in this trade. I think that they did a great job. They got one of the better deals they could have gotten for Paul. Ricky Rubio and Kelly Oubre are both expiring contracts. I think that Rubio will be very flippable for a team that needs a point guard. I could see them getting a first round pick in exchange for his services. So once again, the Thunder continue to stockpile assets, and I think that similar to acquiring Danny Green, Ricky Rubio is another guy that is going to have trade value, and they're going to be able to get some solid draft capital out of him. Kelly Oubre has potential as a guy who's still pretty young, can play the wing, is a solid defender, can shoot the ball a bit, and is very athletic as well. So he's the kind of guy that every NBA team wants. And he's on their timeline with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Darius Bazley. He's a bit older than those two guys, but if you re-sign him to an extension this coming offseason, he'll be under contract through his prime years. So I do think that that'd be something they should be very interested in and work to get done, would be a contract extension with Kelly Oubre, as I think that he could be a piece for them in their upcoming rebuild. I don't love what this means for Lu Dort. As a big Lu Dort fan, I think that Kelly Oubre probably plays a pretty similar role to Lu Dort and maybe plays it a little better. He's not quite the defender that Dort is, but he also shoots the ball much better. So there's going to be some overlap there, and that's a bit of a bummer because Lu Dort is a very fun player to watch with how hard he works on defense. Ty Jerome is a decent option as a backup point guard. We saw him win the championship in his time at Virginia, and he looks to be someone that's going to be like a floor general type, good ball handler, good playmaker, can shoot the three a little bit and has some defensive potential, but doesn't really stand out in any particular area, is pretty much just going to be your run-of-the-mill backup point guard for years to come. Jalen Lecque has a bit more potential to become something more than a backup than Ty Jerome does, but there's also a pretty big chance that he just becomes a bust. He's showed how freaky of an athlete he can be with his exciting G League dunks this past season, but outside of that, he still has a lot of room that he needs to grow, and if he can't do that, then he'll likely be out of the league sooner than later. This was a really, really good return for the Thunder in exchange for a guy that they pretty much acquired along with like 3 first-round picks. So we just see Sam Presti continue to win trade after trade. This team might not even be done yet, as there's still a chance that Danilo Gallinari could be signed in trade, and Steven Adams could also be traded still. So we may not be done seeing the Thunder add to their pot of assets. As of now, they've got so many first-round picks from the Clippers. They have a couple from the Heat, a couple from the Rockets. Now they have this pick from the Suns. And at some point, you just have to imagine that all these assets are going to start turning into some good players. So at this point, this team might not be the playoff team and a contender to make it out of the first round like they were last year, but they still have some very exciting young players like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Kelly Oubre, Lou Dort, and Darius Bazley, while also having some veterans that could help them be a competent and really pretty solid team. I don't think that they would lose much more than 50 games if they keep this roster intact with guys like Ricky Rubio, Danny Green, and Steven Adams under contract. There's a chance that all of those guys could get moved for some more draft capital, but at this point, I really like what the Thunder are doing. I think that getting that 2022 first round pick was a super good move for them, and that's going to end up being a very valuable pick. So, overall, I give the Thunder an A for this trade. Giving up Chris Paul and getting all of this great value for him, even if it is just expiring contracts and they don't keep Kelly Oubre long term, and Ty Jerome and Jalen Lecque don't pan out, and Ricky Rubio, they don't find a trade suitor for him and he expires after this season. They still got that first round pick for Chris Paul, and they're going to have some cap space for next offseason where they can potentially add something that could help make them a good team sooner while also maintaining the youth movement with all of the first round picks they have from other teams in the future. So I think that what the Thunder are doing right now is terrific. That's why I gave them an A. I think that the Suns could have done a bit better in this trade, but I still think that they get a B- for improving their roster, although it does come at the cost of hurting their depth a little bit. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments section down below who you think won this trade. Leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy. That's it for me, ladies and gentlemen. I will see you all again very soon.